Today's lesson is called World Population Set to Fall in 50 Years. Hello, everyone. My name is Jeff.
My name is Roger, and today we're going to talk about the world population. Population, of course, refers to how many people there are in a certain place. Like, what's the population of Taiwan? Well, about 23 million or so. But, what's the population of the world? How many billions of people are there? But here we're talking about the world population possibly falling. The numbers are going to go down. There will be fewer and fewer people in the world in 50 years.
And this is probably a good thing. Now, I don't want people to die or anything like that. Don't mistake what I'm about to say. But for millions of years, there were never more than, millions or hundreds of millions of human beings on planet Earth. That's the way it was until the Industrial Revolution. And then the world population totally exploded. Whereas before there were only hundreds of millions of people on Earth, now there are billions upon billions of people on Earth. There are way too many people out there. This can't be good for the Earth. All of those people have to eat and they have to drink water. So, oh my goodness. There are too many people consuming too many resources. We need to give Mother Earth a break. So you know what? The world population, as long as it's not going to fall because of like a terrible event, this might be for the betterment of the Earth and for the human species as well. So there you go. The world population set to fall. It might just fall in 50 years or so. I think this is actually a good development. Anyways, folks, with that, it's time for us to take a short break, but don't go away. We'll be right back after this.
World population set to fall in 50 years. For decades, people were terrified by the world's population explosion. Science fiction movies pictured an overpopulated planet with cities overrun by crowds and people dying of starvation. A new study, however, shows a very different future, one with shrinking populations that will pose challenges of their own.
大家好，标题中我们看到片语 something or somebody be set to 动词，表示将会点点点，准备好点点点。例如 Andy is set to win the highest award in athletics at his high school. Andy 可能在他高中的运动竞赛中夺冠，或是 The author is set to release her second novel. 那位作家准备要出他第二本书。再来，我们看到动词 terrify， 指使害怕、恐惧。例如 The thunder and lightning terrified the little girl, and she started to cry. 闪电雷声吓到那个小女孩，所以她就哭了。或是Laura was terrified when she saw a strange man looking in through her window. 当 Laura 发现有一个陌生人往她的窗户里看，她被吓坏了。另外，这个字的字尾加上 ing， 就成了形容词 terrifying， 指可怕的、吓人的。像是 Being trapped in an elevator for hours was Lucy's most terrifying experience. 受困在电梯中几个小时是令 Lucy 最害怕的经验。接着，我们看到片语Be overrun by or with something 表示充斥着点点点，点点点泛滥肆虐。举例来说 The city was overrun by thousands of rats 这城市鼠满为患。或是 The classroom was overrun with tiny black ants 教室里小黑蚁横行。再来我们看到名词 starvation 指饥饿挨饿。例如 Surrounded by enemies and with winter coming,The residents of the city face starvation. 因为敌人环伺，冬天又即将来临，居民们面临饿死的危机。另外，补充这个字的动词 starve, S-T-A-R-V-E, starve 指使挨饿，使饿死。像是 Starving yourself is not a healthy method of losing weight. 挨饿不是健康的减重方式。
All right, let's take a look at the title here. It says, the world population is set to fall in 50 years. So here we've got the phrase set to, which means it's going to in the future, or experts think that this is what is going to happen. The world is preparing to have a population fall in 50 years' time, which, as you said earlier, might be a good thing. There'll be less stress on resources and things like that, and maybe fewer and fewer animal species will go extinct. Now, here in the first paragraph, it says, for decades, people were terrified by the world's population explosion. Yes, I remember when I was a kid, you heard about this in the news. There was a book published a long time ago called The Population Bomb, which was predicting disaster for the Earth. The population is just going to keep going up and up and up and up and up, and there's not going to be enough food, and people are going to be killing each other for a bag of popcorn or something like that. People were terrified by what was going to happen because of the population boom, or the population explosion. An explosion, a sudden increase in something. You may find this hard to believe, but there was a time when there wasn't an internet. And suddenly, I think it was in the 1990s, everybody got a PC or a Mac or whatever, and they had internet access. There was an internet explosion. One day, no one was using the internet, and the next day, lots and lots of people were using it. So yes, there was an internet explosion in the 1990s, and people, of course, in the past were scared by the possibility of a population explosion. Now, science fiction movies pictured an overpopulated planet with cities overrun by crowds and people dying of starvation. Okay, so yes, indeed, you had sci-fi movies coming out and showing us what the future is going to be like. If a movie shows us something that doesn't really exist and they try to help us imagine that thing, they picture this particular scene. Picture this in your mind, or imagine this, what will happen if you got a job for this particular company, how rich you would be, you know, how many people would like you. Just picture that, imagine that. But here, of course, these movies pictured an overpopulated planet. Overpopulated means there are just too many people.
There you go. A city can be populated, filled with people. No problem. If it's overpopulated, there are too many people, and negative things are happening as a consequence of this. Now, it says here that in the future, people are worried that cities might become overrun by crowds. Now, I am worried about this, but here we're not talking about actual people and actual situations, I should say. It says here that science fiction movies have pictured or imagined these fictional scenarios where cities become overrun by crowds and people are dying of starvation. By the way, starvation, that's the noun. It comes from the verb to starve. If you starve, you're dying because you're just that hungry. It's not a matter of simple hunger. Oh, I need a cheeseburger. You're actually dying because you don't have enough food. You're just that hungry. You've been hungry for a very long time, so you are starving to death. You are suffering from starvation. Further, we also have this phrase, to be overrun by. Here the word overrun kind of means the same as invade. So these groups of people, maybe they're coming from the country, the barren countryside, and they invade the cities. Now, they aren't armies invading, but they kind of take over the cities by virtue of their sheer numbers.
Right, or if you don't clean your kitchen, it will be overrun by cockroaches. Now, here in the next sentence it says, a new study, however, shows a very different future, one with shrinking populations that will pose challenges of their own. So, yes, we've got a new study or some new research that says, hey, there's not going to be a big disaster in the future because of a population explosion. Quite to the contrary, things are going to be different. We've actually got a shrinking population. That's a different kind of situation. We might think that is a good thing, but as this sentence says, it will pose challenges of its own, or at least this particular future will have its own challenges. So yes, shrinking populations. Shrinking here is from the verb to shrink, which means to reduce in size. Like I think when I first went to college, I put a wool sweater in the dryer, and of course it shrank. Okay, it got really, really small, and I was unable to wear it. I learned in the future that wool sweaters need to be dry cleaned.
Anyways, folks, with that, it is time for us to take a short break, but don't go away. When we come back, we'll continue reading from our article called World Population Set to Fall in 50 Years.
Researchers at the University of Washington studied the global fertility rate, the average number of children women give birth to, and what they found was shocking. The global fertility rate in 2017 was 2.4 children, just half of what it was in 1950. What's more, when the rate drops below 2.1, populations shrink. The study projects it will fall to below 1.7 by 2100, which could result in declining populations worldwide.
第二部分我们看到单字 researcher 这个字是名词，指研究人员、调查员。我们可以说The researcher's project is being funded by the university. 这些研究员的研究计划是由该大学资助的。另外，这个字去掉字尾 er， 还有以下两种用法。第一，当名词指研究、调查，念作 research。例如 I read a lot of research on the topic before I wrote the report. 我在写报告前看了很多这个主题的研究。第二，当动词指研究、调查，念作 research， 像是The traveler went to the island to research its ancient history. 旅人到那座岛上去研究它的古老历史。
Okay, let's talk some more about the possibility of shrinking populations in the future in various parts of the world. We've got some researchers at the University of Washington. And a university, of course, is a big educational institution that offers degrees, bachelors of arts, sciences, and graduate degrees and doctorate degrees. You get the idea. So researchers there at the U of W studied the global fertility rate. And what is that, you might ask? Well, that's the average number of children women give birth to. And what they found was shocking here. So again, it's the fertility rate. Fertility is a noun, and the fertility rate refers to the number of children women give birth to.
There you go. These are researchers at the University of Washington. They've uncovered something shocking. The global fertility rate in 2017 was 2.4 children, just half of what it was in 1950. So, populations grow when parents give birth to a lot of kids. And that number, well, it's dropping on average the world over. The global fertility rate was just 2.4 children. And yes, that's down by about 50%. It used to be that people had 4 to 5 kids, all right? Each family would have 4 to 5 kids in it. That's not the case anymore on average. Now, a small note here, these are researchers at the University of Washington. If you are a researcher, you probably work at a university or something like that, and you do research. You study something at great length in order to learn about it. Anyways, global birth rates, they are falling and falling fast. And what's more, when the rate drops below 2.1, populations shrink. So now it's 2.4. When we get to 2.1, Earth's population will start to shrink.
And, that sounds like a good thing. It sounds like there will be fewer and fewer people in the world to destroy the resources and stuff like that. But again, as we said earlier, it's going to pose its own problems here. But in any case, the study projects or predicts for the future that the fertility rate will fall to below 1.7 by the year 2100, which could result in declining populations worldwide. Okay, so here declining is describing populations, the number of people living in certain parts of the world. So that's from the verb to decline. It could also be a noun here, but it's from the verb to decline, which means to go down in number. We could say birth defects are declining all over the world, whereas here, by the year 2100, populations in different countries could go down or decline. And, of course, there will be fewer people as a result. Okay, that brings us to the end of the second part of our lesson. Let's move on now to the third and final part. We'll listen to it first.
Around 23 countries, including Japan and South Korea, will see their populations halved by 2100. At the same time, countries will be aging faster. There may be as many people turning 80 as there are children being born. All this will create great economic and social change. Countries will have to rethink their immigration policies, and economies will have to adjust. A much smaller number of young people will have to support a growing elderly population.
最后第三部分我们看到动词 have 指将点点点减半，将点点点对半分。例如 Brian halved the cake to share it with his neighbor. Brian 将蛋糕分为两半分给邻居。
Okay, everyone, we are back right now. The global fertility rate is 2.4. Now, when that rate drops below 2.1, populations shrink. And some people think that this number is going to fall to 1.7 by the year 2100, and that will result in declining populations worldwide. So, will this happen? Could it happen? Well, people seem to think so. This might just happen. Around 23 countries, we learn, including Japan and South Korea, will see their populations halved by 2100. So let's say your population is 50 million right now. If that population gets halved, it's cut in half from 100 million, let's say, to 50 million.
That's right. Japanese people and Korean people just don't like to have children like they used to. So there will be fewer Japanese and South Korean people in the world, which is bad news. With fewer South Koreans around, there are going to be fewer cute boy bands like BTS or whatever. That is a tragedy indeed. Well, at the same time, countries will be aging faster. There'll be more and more old people in the population. And as you know, you've probably got some grandparents, or even your parents for that matter, who are getting older and they're having more and more problems with their health, and they need to go to the hospital more and more often, or you might need to hire a caregiver or something like that. Those things cost money. So indeed, with an aging population, you're going to have new problems.
Yeah, there may be as many people turning 80 as there are children being born. So imagine that you're a couple and you decide to have a child. You'll have that child to take care of and maybe also an 80-year-old relative to take care of at the same time. It's like taking care of two totally different babies at the same time. Now, all jokes aside, this is not necessarily a good thing at all. All this will create great economic and social change. There you go. By the way, here we have the word economic, and that means of or having to do with the economy. And when we're talking about the economy for a country or for an area, we're talking about the business climate there. Are businesses doing well and making money? Are companies thriving? So on and so forth. That's what it means to talk about an economy or the economic condition of a particular place or country. Now, it says countries will have to rethink their immigration policies, and economies will have to adjust.
That's right. So, yeah, Japan doesn't like to let in a lot of immigrants, but if their population keeps declining and they get older and older, there isn't going to be anybody there to take care of them. So they're going to have to open their doors to people from Southeast Asia or wherever, and a much smaller number of young people will have to support a growing elderly population. So the tax base is going to shrink, and there's going to be more and more older people who need their Jianbao, their national health insurance, which will probably disappear if they can't pay for it from taxes. Okay, that's a real problem, and this is going to be a big problem in Taiwan as well. Okay, that brings us to the end of our discussion. Here comes our Chinese teacher.
各位同学大家好，我是 Hanny。 我们来看今天的文法重点。好，数十年来人们对于世界人口激增感到恐惧，有些人可能会担心人口过剩导致环境无法承载。那么课文它用到overpopulated 这个字，我们先来看看 populate P-O-P-U-L-A-T-E。 好，这个动词呢，它表示居住于或者生活于。那么在 overpopulated 这个字当中，它的字首 over 表示过度，那么 populated 是指有人居住的，把它合在一起 overpopulated 就是形容人口过多的。那顺便补充几个有相同字首的单字，像 overcrowded 就是过度拥挤的， overwork 工作过度那就是过劳，那么 overload 表示超载。好，那么还有 overwhelm 它是指使什么难以承受的。那我们补充一下 overwhelm 它的字根 W-H-E-L-M 它表示翻转过来。那我们不是说 over 是过度吗？同学们就可以试着联想，当翻转的力量过大而被压倒了，就会让人是招架不住难以承受的。好，课文第一部分的最后一句写道 A new study, however, shows a very different future, one with shrinking populations that will pose challenges of their own. 好，句子里面用到 pose 是当动词来表达造成、引起，常常用来表达造成、形成了什么样的难题或是困境等等。那么 pose challenges 就表示带来挑战。那我们看到文中 challenges 后面接了 of their own。Of one's own 它是指说属于自己的或者是独有的，那它的用法是要接在名词后面，而这个名词通常是具体的事物或者是特质。举例来说 Don't depend on them. They've got problems of their own. 别仰赖他们了，他们有自己的问题要处理。好，那么课文第二部分提到关于全球生育率的研究，那这个段落它用到 give birth， 它是指生产或者是分娩，后面常常会搭配介系词 to。Give birth to 加上人或动物就可以表达说生下婴儿啊、孩子等等。例如 Their cat gave birth to 5 kittens. 他们的猫咪生下了5只小猫。那另外我们也可以在 give birth to 后面接事物来表达引起什么、使什么产生、使什么诞生或是创造出什么。举例来说 The revolution gave birth to a new nation. 那场革命让一个新的国家诞生了。好，以上今天重点整理，我们来回顾今天的单字吧。
Terrify. Frank doesn't like giving speeches. As for singing in public, it terrifies him. Explosion. There was a population explosion in the 1950s known as the baby boom. Researcher. The researcher carried out a survey to find out how people would react to the new law. University. After high school, many people decide to go to university to further their education. Economic. Voters will want the new government to address their economic concerns.
Discussion starter starts now.
Okay, here's our discussion starter for today. The question is, do you think we should be worried about a shrinking global population?
Sure, there are reasons to be worried about this, but a shrinking global population could be a good thing. Earth right now is being stressed out by how many human beings are on planet Earth and using those resources of planet Earth up. So Sure, in the medium term, we might have some issues because of this particular shrinking global population problem, but I think after a while this will turn out to be, on the whole, a good thing for us and for the Earth.
Yes, I agree. A shrinking global population will be a good thing because, yes, you're going to have lots of old people for a while, but eventually all those old people will die off and the age of the population will stabilize, and then we can start fixing up the world, and global warming will be a thing of the past, and extinction of species will also be a thing of the past. It will be a paradise in the solar system.
Okay, everyone. With that, today's article is now complete. But, as always, we sure hope that you guys have enjoyed reading along with us. Anyways, I'm Jeff.
I am Roger.
See you next time.